I remember exactly how the room smelled: stale coffee and fear. Monday morning staff meeting, everyone seated around the big oval table. My heart was still racing from sprinting to the elevator when Karen, my manager, cleared her throat. She scanned the room and fixed her eyes on me. I thought she was going to congratulate me on finishing last week's backlog. Instead, she said, "Layla, you've been stealing company property. Don't think we haven't noticed." Time stopped. I felt sweat trickle down my back. Everyone stared like I was some freak show. My breath got caught in my throat, and I could barely form words. My coworker Anna, the one I always ate lunch with, shrunk in her seat, avoiding eye contact. The entire table went dead silent. People slowly inched away from me, as if I might be contagious. Karen stood, crossed her arms, and tossed a folder onto the table. "You know what you did," she said. The folder was empty. A total bluff, but I froze. I couldn't defend myself without proof. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My face burned with shame. I should have yelled back or demanded evidence. But I just sat there, numb. When the meeting ended, everyone rushed out like they were late for something. Karen smirked. I stayed frozen in my chair. Eventually, I forced myself to stand, arms shaking, and followed the crowd back to our workstations. I needed to talk to Karen in private, but my legs felt like jelly. I cornered her outside her office. I stammered, "What's going on? Why are you accusing me?" She didn't even blink. "Don't play dumb," she snapped, voice dripping with contempt. "We both know what you did." Then she slammed her door. I stood there, stunned. That was it. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. My closest work friend, Anna, walked by, head down. I whispered, "Anna, what's happening?" She looked at me, guilt in her eyes, but she just shook her head and hurried off. That hurt more than Karen's accusation. We used to share secrets over donuts and coffee. Now she was acting like I was radioactive. I felt utterly alone. HR was nowhere to be found. They skipped the meeting, and I hadn't seen a single rep all day. The whole thing felt orchestrated. I knew then, this wasn't some random misunderstanding. This was betrayal, plain and simple. By lunchtime, the office felt like a hornet's nest. People whispered behind screens, typed on Slack with frantic speed. My phone lit up with messages, some supportive, most cautious. I caught snippets of conversation. "Did you hear she stole something? Karen wouldn't lie, right? Better stay away." My appetite vanished, but I forced myself to the break room. The second I walked in, the hush was deafening. Nobody would look me in the eye. A few people cleared their throats, suddenly fascinated by their sandwiches. Others scooted their chairs away as though I might snatch their wallets. Trying to hold back tears, I grabbed a protein bar and left. I found an empty conference room and sat there, alone, chewing and staring at the gray walls. My mind raced with panic. I didn't just see suspicion in people's eyes, I saw fear. Karen was the manager, and managers held power. If she painted me as a thief, who would dare challenge her? I scrolled through Slack. A single direct message popped up from an unknown user. "Sorry this is happening to you." Nothing more. Even that tiny bit of sympathy made my eyes burn. It was like the entire floor had turned against me overnight. Later that evening, I dragged myself home, replaying the day in my mind. I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this wasn't random. Karen had never exactly liked me, but calling me a thief was extreme. I stared at my laptop, recalling our last real conversation from the previous week. She'd asked me to backdate an invoice for her friend's small business. I remember her breezy tone. "Just put last month's date. It'll help them with their taxes." I felt my stomach twist. That was definitely illegal. I told her politely, "I'm sorry, but I can't." She got huffy, said something about me owing her for my job. I refused. She stormed out. Now it all clicked. This accusation wasn't about some missing supply or item. It was retaliation for not helping her commit fraud. My heart pounded. That explained why HR was nowhere to be found. They were probably in on the cover-up, or at least Karen had them wrapped around her finger. I sat in bed, hugging a pillow, tears silently streaming. I couldn't decide what felt worse, the false accusation or the fact that Karen had set me up so carefully. She wanted me gone, and she was willing to ruin my entire life to do it. I woke up puffy-eyed and exhausted. Rent was due next week, and I relied on this job. My mind spun with all the terrible possibilities. What if I got fired, or worse, blacklisted from the industry? I opened a new Google Doc and started typing everything I remembered, every detail. Dates, times, emails, phone calls. I took screenshots of Slack conversations and labeled them meticulously. I made a folder on my desktop called Karen Proof. Paranoid? Maybe. But I knew if I didn't collect evidence, I'd be stuck with no defense. After an hour, I felt more grounded. There was something comforting about having a plan. At work, I kept my face neutral, my body steady. I told myself, no tears in the office, no meltdown in front of Karen. When people gave me side-eye, I pretended not to notice. My heart hammered, but outwardly I acted calm. I answered calls politely, finished my tasks, and even managed a tight smile at the receptionist. Inside, though, I was terrified. My stomach twisted every time I heard Karen's heels clicking down the hallway. I had to keep it together, at least until I could prove I wasn't the thief she claimed I was. I emailed HR first thing, requesting an urgent meeting to clear my name. No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. Finally, I marched over to their office. The door was locked, blinds drawn. A note said, HR staff in meetings all day, email to reschedule. I almost laughed. Later, I bumped into an HR coordinator near the elevator. I forced a polite smile. Hey, I'm trying to schedule a meeting about Karen's accusation. She frowned and shook her head. We'll be in touch soon, she said, walking away quickly. I could almost taste her anxiety. That same afternoon, a coworker I barely knew approached my desk, glancing around like a spy. She whispered, "They're trying to build a case against you. You need to watch your back." Then she hurried off before I could ask anything else. My chest tightened. This was a conspiracy. They were ignoring my requests, making sure Karen's story went unchallenged. On paper, it might look like I was avoiding the issue or refusing to cooperate, but the truth was they were stonewalling me. I realized I had to gather evidence on my own, because if I couldn't rely on HR, I was on my own battlefield. I was packing up for the day, feeling defeated, when I got a ping from Miles, my old intern who'd moved to the IT department. The message read, "Hey, can we talk? It's urgent." Miles was this genius kid with a knack for digital forensics. He'd also been my go-to for any weird tech issues. I told him to meet me in the back stairwell, somewhere off the radar. He showed up, eyes darting. "I saw something in the logs," he whispered. "Karen accessed your account with your credentials last week. It's suspicious." My heart pounded. This was the first real proof I had. "So I didn't do what she's accusing me of?" I asked. Miles shook his head firmly. "No, the system logs show your user ID was active after you clocked out. Karen had to have used your login." I felt a surge of relief and anger. This confirmed everything. She'd planted digital footprints to make me look guilty. I swallowed hard. "I need everything," I said, voice trembling. "Any logs, timestamps, screenshots, anything you can find." Miles nodded, determined. "I'm on it," he said. A small flicker of hope ignited inside me. 2 days later, Miles slipped a USB drive into my hand. We hid in the stairwell again, leaning against the cold concrete. "I found more than just login activity," he said quietly. "There's deleted surveillance footage from the hallway near your desk, but I managed to back it up before it got wiped." I plugged the USB into my laptop at home that night, heart pounding. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Karen lingering at my desk after hours. I saw her looking around, then opening a drawer. She typed something on my computer. The timestamp was from the night before she accused me. Rage boiled up in my veins. Additionally, Miles unearthed a suspicious edit log. Karen had used my credentials to access the system. She created phantom orders under my name. My entire body shook as I read the lines of code. This was evidence of a framed job, plain as day. But I knew if I blasted it publicly, they'd circle the wagons. I needed a strategy. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched, realizing Karen had been methodical, but she underestimated one thing. I wasn't going down without a fight. And now I had proof. I decided not to storm into HR or confront Karen directly. That's exactly what she expected. Instead, I started playing the long game. First, I quietly applied for internal transfers. If Karen wanted me gone, maybe I could slip into another department and keep my job without her overshadowing everything. I also began documenting every conversation, every suspicious email. Whenever Karen cornered me in the hallway with her fake smile, I'd politely excuse myself, then write down the time and her exact words. I turned into an emotional detective, cataloging every interaction like evidence in a courtroom. It was draining, but it gave me a sense of control. I avoided discussing the situation with coworkers, especially those who only wanted gossip. Let them think I was scared or defeated. I knew my best weapon was my silence, coupled with the growing stack of proof I had. My Google Doc was now a miniature novel of wrongdoing. Late at night, I'd sit in my tiny kitchen sipping tea, imagining Karen's face when she finally got caught. The idea of revenge scared me, but also fueled me. She had humiliated me publicly. I was determined to end this in a way she'd never see coming. A few days later, I got an unexpected call from the CEO's assistant. She said the CEO himself wanted me on a new cross-department project. I nearly dropped my phone. Was this real? Had he not heard the rumors? I half expected a trick, but the invitation was legit. It was a huge opportunity, one that could skyrocket my career. Only problem, it meant working directly under Karen's nose. The next morning, the CEO announced the project in a department-wide email. My name was right there, listed as the main administrative coordinator. My first thought was pure panic. Karen was going to lose her mind. Sure enough, her reaction was immediate. She marched into the CEO's office, probably armed with lies about my theft. But the CEO stood firm. Word on the grapevine was that HR tried to discourage him, but he overruled them. In the hallway, Karen locked eyes with me. Her face twisted with rage. She didn't say a word, but that glare said everything. I was now a direct threat to her. My stomach churned with nerves, but a tiny spark of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, I was about to turn this nightmare into an unexpected win. Karen wasted no time fighting back. She overloaded my email with urgent tasks, most of them impossible to complete on short notice. She dropped by my cubicle, randomly sneering, "How's that big project going, superstar?" She'd belittle me in front of others. "Layla can't handle pressure," she'd say, rolling her eyes. Then came the nastier rumors. I overheard a conversation by the coffee machine. Karen says Layla got close to the CEO in a, personal way. That's how she landed that project. I nearly threw up when I heard it. Rumors that I'd slept my way up spread through Slack channels like a virus. I started recording everything on my phone. Whenever Karen approached me, I hit the voice recorder. Even if all she did was insult my outfit, I wanted it documented. The fear of being discovered made my hands sweat, but it was necessary. Every false claim, every petty sabotage attempt collected in my hidden folder. At night, I'd slump on my couch, fighting a swirl of emotions, anger, humiliation, and a craving for justice. I told myself, this can't go on forever. One way or another, the truth will come out. But part of me worried how much more I could take. The office's mood shifted like quicksand. A few people, once distant, started sliding into my DMs with apologetic messages. "I'm sorry if I believed Karen. Are you okay?" Some offered to help with my workload, quietly acknowledging they knew Karen was out of line. It was the first sign that maybe not everyone had bought her lies. On the flip side, a handful of people doubled down on the gossip, refusing to meet my gaze or spreading the rumor that I was two-faced. But I realized something. They were mostly Karen's longtime minions, the ones who'd do anything to stay on her good side. Fine, let them talk. One day, an email popped up in my inbox from an anonymous sender. The subject read, "Karen and HR." My pulse raced. I opened it to find a forwarded email chain between Karen and an HR rep, discussing ways to discourage Layla from pursuing any complaints. My eyes widened at phrases like, "We'll paint her as uncooperative," and "Goal, push her to resign." That single email changed my perspective. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. This was a calculated smear campaign. It was big, dirty, and official. Anger twisted in my chest. Now I had no choice. I had to fight. Not even a week after I joined the CEO's project, Karen struck again. She walked into the open office area, carrying a company laptop. She placed it on my desk and whispered, "We need to talk about inventory, Layla." Then she sauntered off, a smug smile on her face. Later that day, I got a formal complaint filed against me. HR claimed I failed to log a company laptop, suggesting I'd been hoarding equipment or taking it home without permission. The entire ordeal felt surreal. Was this her new angle, planting stuff at my desk? Thankfully, Miles was 2 steps ahead. He messaged me a time-stamped security video from that very morning, showing Karen approaching my desk, placing the laptop there. My name was on 0 checkout forms. It was so blatant and sloppy, like she was desperate for something to stick. I stared at the footage, heart pounding. Karen was losing control. Her attempts were becoming obvious to everyone. Still, the complaint was on record, tarnishing me further. I made a copy of that video, emailed it to my personal account, and labeled it laptop setup. I wasn't going to let this nonsense become her final nail in my coffin. I took a breath and decided it was time to use my network. I'd built relationships with a few senior managers over the years. I reached out for casual coffee chats, steering the conversation to unusual happenings in my department. I dropped breadcrumbs, never outright accusing Karen, but hinting at unethical behavior and questionable management tactics. One senior executive, Mr. Coleman, listened carefully. I showed him a couple of odd emails from Karen, lightly redacted. I ended with a calm statement. I'm concerned about the company's reputation if this escalates. I could see the gears turning in his mind. Coleman wasn't the type to ignore potential PR disasters. Next, I forwarded a small packet of concerning documents to an executive assistant I trusted, with a note. For your eyes only. We may need leadership awareness. Then I backed off, letting the seeds grow. If they took an interest, I'd show more. If not, I'd keep my big guns, Miles's evidence, under wraps until the right moment. Days later, I got a cryptic email from Coleman's office. We appreciate your diligence. Please continue to share any relevant information. We will be monitoring this situation closely. My plan was in motion. The walls around Karen were starting to close in. I saw it in Karen's eyes the following Monday, anxiety creeping in. She looked over her shoulder more often, snapped at her usual allies, and typed furiously on her computer. She might not have known exactly what was happening, but she sensed her power slipping. Behind the scenes, executives had quietly told HR to keep an eye on Karen's behavior. Her micromanagement grew frantic. She'd send me messages at 3 a.m., demanding completed reports by 9 a.m. I followed every rule precisely, every deadline, every protocol. Meanwhile, rumors buzzed that the CEO was evaluating departmental structures. Then I got word I'd be temporarily relocated to a satellite office. Some nonsense about minimizing tension. Part of me was relieved to get away from Karen's immediate presence, but part of me knew they were also trying to isolate me. Fine. I'd work quietly from the satellite location, still collecting evidence. My biggest worry was losing direct access to Miles and IT. But we agreed on secure ways to communicate. I watched from a distance as Karen's composure frayed. Coworkers whispered that she was complaining about me to anyone who'd listen, trying to spin new stories of my incompetence. But fewer people believed her now. The tide was shifting. My phone buzzed while I was on lunch break at the satellite office. A new email from Miles, marked private. Inside was a link to a secure folder. No text, just that link. My heart jackhammered. I hopped onto a personal laptop and clicked through. What I found was explosive. There was a new batch of surveillance footage, plus metadata logs that showed Karen's repeated use of my login credentials at odd hours. But the real bombshell was an audio clip from a Zoom meeting. Karen had apparently recorded it herself but forgot to stop the recording. In the audio, she was talking to someone, sounded like a friend or maybe that HR rep, admitting she'd created a story to get Layla out. She even laughed at how gullible people could be. I sat back, stunned. This was airtight. Not just suspicious logs or secondhand emails, this was Karen confessing her scheme in her own voice. My fingers trembled on the keyboard. I knew in that moment I had enough evidence to end her career. But how to use it wisely? Part of me wanted to expose her right away. Another part insisted on a more strategic approach. I decided to wait, to plan carefully. This was my golden ticket. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I got a call from a recruiter. She said, "Layla, I've heard great things about your organizational skills. We have an opening for an operations manager, and we'd love to interview you." My eyes widened. A higher-paying job? Somewhere else? I'd barely been sleeping, stressed out of my mind, and here was a lifeline. 2 interviews later, they offered me a position on the spot. The salary was a jump. The environment seemed healthy, and it felt like a godsend. My first instinct was to throw my resignation letter in Karen's face. But then I paused. I still had unfinished business at my current job. The memory of that humiliating meeting, the betrayal, the intimidation, I wasn't ready to leave quietly without clearing my name. So I accepted the new job, but told them I needed a few weeks before starting. They agreed, happy to wait for me, my chest filled with relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely hopeful about my future, but I also felt a simmering sense of purpose. Before walking away, I wanted Karen and everyone else to know the truth, and I wanted an apology, or at least a reckoning. I scheduled a check-in with HR, requesting a Zoom call. They couldn't ignore me this time. I was part of a high-profile project, so they had to appear cooperative. In the meeting, it was me, 2 HR reps, and a startled Karen. She clearly hadn't expected to see me. I kept my voice calm, my expression neutral. I started by saying, I have some footage and recordings to share. I clicked share screen, playing the incriminating Zoom audio first. Karen's face went pale. HR reps looked at each other, stunned. I showed them the metadata logs next, pointing out the timestamps and user IDs. Finally, I played the short clip of Karen planting the laptop at my desk. The digital proof hammered each lie she'd told. When it ended, I said softly, I'd like this handled internally if possible, but if not, I have media contacts who'd be very interested in this story. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to hold eye contact. The HR reps fumbled for words, stammering about review and due diligence. Karen tried to speak, but nothing coherent came out. The silence was deafening. I ended the call by saying, thank you. I look forward to next steps. Then I clicked, leave meeting. My heart felt like it might burst right out of my chest. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, I got an email requesting my presence at a special review session with the company's legal team. My phone rang non-stop with calls from HR, all sounding frantic and overly polite. It was surreal. Just a week ago, these people wouldn't even return my emails. Behind closed doors, the legal team grilled me for details. They apologized multiple times for any undue stress I'd experienced. I knew it was partly fear of a lawsuit, but it felt good to see them squirm. They asked me not to share any evidence publicly, promising they'd handle the matter swiftly. I just nodded, thinking, where were you all this time? Meanwhile, the CEO finally got wind of what was happening. I heard from my executive contact, Coleman, that he was furious. No one told him earlier. The rumor was he slammed a stack of papers on a conference table, demanding, why was I kept in the dark? Karen was suspiciously absent from the office that day. HR said she'd taken a personal day. Everyone sensed the tension thick in the air. Something big was about to go down, and I was no longer the scapegoat. Now, all eyes were on Karen and the people who'd backed her lies. A week later, Karen and I were both summoned to a formal meeting. The invite list included HR, the CEO, the company's head of legal, and one other executive. My heart pounded as I walked into the conference room. Karen stood there, arms folded, trying to look confident, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The CEO's voice was cold and direct. This is a performance review for you, Karen. Please sit. She looked thrown off. I sat to one side, quietly. The head of legal began playing my evidence. First, the Zoom audio of Karen bragging about framing me. Next, the footage of her planting the laptop. Finally, the doctored logs that Miles had uncovered, with the original timestamps displayed. Karen went red, then pale. She stammered, this is twisted. Someone set me up. But the more she spoke, the worse it looked. The room was dead silent when the videos ended. The CEO turned to Karen. Explain yourself, he demanded. Her only response was to blame IT, to blame me, even to blame HR. But no one believed her. At that moment, I felt a weird blend of relief and pity. This was the reckoning I'd waited for. Everything happened fast. Karen tried to defend herself, repeating the same tired lines. Layla's a thief. The evidence is faked. The CEO wasn't having it. With legal present, he spoke in a calm but final tone. We're suspending you immediately, pending further investigation. Turn in your badge and your company phone. HR representatives deactivated her emails on the spot. I saw the shock in her eyes as her phone screen went blank, her access revoked. She stood up, livid, knocking her chair over. This is a setup, she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. You'll all regret this. No one responded. 2 security guards stepped forward, quietly gesturing for her to leave. She tried to snatch her purse from the table, scattering papers everywhere. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it. I just sat there, forcing my hands to stay still, my face neutral. As soon as Karen was gone, the CEO sighed heavily, turning to me. Layla, we owe you an apology. This should never have happened. My lips wobbled, but I managed a nod. I thought back to that day she'd humiliated me in front of everyone. Now she was the one walking out in shame. Within 24 hours, HR sent out a company-wide memo. They cited recent misinformation and clarified that I'd been exonerated of all accusations. They apologized for any confusion. It was a stiff, corporate statement, but it cleared my name. My inbox flooded with messages from coworkers saying, "I'm so glad you're okay. We knew something was off. And sorry if I ever doubted you." The apology parade felt hollow. Some people were genuine, but others were obviously scrambling to be on the right side of the story now that Karen was out. I responded politely but briefly to each one, not eager to resume fake friendships. HR arranged a small meeting to discuss my future at the company. They offered me some half-hearted perks, extra PTO, a small bonus. I could tell they just wanted me to drop any legal threats. I kept my expression calm, thanked them, and said I'd consider it. But my mind was already made up. I didn't want to work somewhere that let me suffer like that. I hadn't told them I had a new job lined up. Let them grovel for a while. Once the meeting ended, I walked out of that conference room with my head high, feeling a sense of validation I'd never felt before. 3 weeks after that awful staff meeting where I'd been called a thief, I found myself back at the office, this time just to collect my final paycheck and drop off my badge. I'd already accepted the new position elsewhere. My personal items were packed. As I entered the lobby, I saw a small commotion by the security desk. It was Karen. Her hair was disheveled, her voice shrill. 2 security guards were guiding her toward the exit. She clutched a cardboard box stuffed with random office supplies. She looked up, and our eyes locked. For a split second, neither of us moved. Her face twisted in anger, a flicker of desperation in her eyes. I expected her to shout something, maybe beg for mercy or hurl insults, but she just glared. I let a faint smirk creep onto my lips. Not out of spite, but out of pure relief. Because in that moment, I was free. She stormed past me, flanked by the guards. I watched her vanish through the doors. Then I made my way to HR, signed some forms, and handed in my badge. It felt like shedding an old skin. The injustice had finally been corrected. I walked out into the sunshine, heart-pounding, thrilled to be done with that toxic place. I went home and updated my LinkedIn profile. New job title, new company. Before logging off, I wrote a single post, "Don't mistake silence for weakness." I hit post and closed my laptop. I didn't explain anything else, but within hours the comment section blew up. People from my old company liked, commented, messaged me privately asking, "Is this about Karen, or what happened?" I didn't respond. The story spread anyway. Someone must have filled in the blanks because I started getting messages from strangers. "I heard you took down your boss. Respect." It felt surreal, but also validating. After everything, the truth was out. Karen was no longer just the manager with all the power. She was a cautionary tale. Word on the grapevine was she'd been blacklisted from a few local firms. Some of my old coworkers apologized again, wanting to reconnect. But I was done. My life had moved on. I poured myself some tea, reflecting on how different things were just a month ago. Back then, I was shaking at my desk, humiliated. Now I was in the driver's seat, and that single LinkedIn post was like a final, triumphant note in a symphony I had composed. My first day at the new job was glorious. My new boss seemed supportive, the team welcomed me, and I felt a fresh start in the air. No more dread in the pit of my stomach. No more bracing for a sudden attack from someone like Karen. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, letting the city lights calm me. I opened my laptop to finish writing an anonymous Medium article I'd started weeks ago, titled, "How I Took Down My Boss Without Saying a Word." Every sentence brought back memories, the shaky hands, the humiliations, the hush of the break room. But it also reminded me how I'd outplayed Karen by staying calm, collecting evidence, and waiting for the right moment. I typed the final line. Sometimes silence is the loudest weapon. I hit publish, feeling a rush of adrenaline. No headlines, no flashy drama, just a quiet end to a painful chapter of my life. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, satisfied. Because in the end, the truth had been enough. And I could finally breathe free, knowing justice had been served.